I'm your host, Jessica Busch, and welcome back to part 2 of The Rise of Integrated Luxury, where hospitality, retail, and residential converge. In part 1, we discussed
the combining of the luxury, residential, hospitality, and retail sectors becoming a powerful one-stop shop sector. So let's talk about expectations, today's expectations.
The best way that I could describe it is it's an amenities arms race.
And I think that comes back to convenience and post-pandemic. And it's that people want a sort of one-stop shop hybrid environment.
So we almost kind of took all of the feedback from all of our different business units and combined it into sort of one sort of investment strategy at this property. And the market actually responded to it.
So we are going to jump back into our conversation about the combination of luxury, hospitality, retail, and residential all coming together in this new sector that is just taking over the industry right now. I have Seb and Jeff with me again, and we are going to jump into all things Printemps. As promised, our earlier episode kind of went over the sector in general and where it's heading, but now I really want to get into this project and what it exemplifies for this sector. So Jeff, Printemps, very complex, unique, one of a kind. It is a wonderful example of where this sector is going. The original plan for this project, I'm sure it was a multi-year, I want to say 4-ish.
That's right, 4 years.
Okay, 4 years in the planning process, in the planning phases. How did things evolve during those 4 years? Can you kind of give us some of that context and before we jump into where we are today?
The story of Printemps in New York really goes back to when we first started looking at the building and envisioning the total how the building would look and feel and actually have its own sort of characteristics. So with Printemps, we called it a lab. It was going to be sort of a first of its kind in the New York market. So Printemps was envisioned as not just a luxury retail department store. Absolutely not. It was envisioned as a total luxury retail experience where you could spend the day, you could have F&B, you could have shopping, you could have all different kinds of experiences with art and music and lifestyle curation. It was envisioned as almost the next level, the next evolution of retail. And that's where we started with the design from the conceptual standpoint almost 4 years ago.
And so, Seb, from your perspective, how does this project kind of represent, let's call it a departure from traditional retail development?
So I think sort of from day one when I went in, I saw the vision from Jeff, from Laura Lendrum and her team, Laura Gonzalez, and the way that they were trying to set up this project was different to traditional retail in that if you've seen the slogan, not a department store, is very important. It's based on a French apartment. You move through the different spaces. All of the spaces are different, have different features, different artwork, different finishes, different installations, which make it sort of a destination. And as Jeff said, an experience for customers to come to, not just for shopping, but for food, for wine, for cocktails, for treatments, for all of those things in between, and just to see this beautiful store. And it really is a departure from what you initially think of when you think of
so the tagline just isn't a tagline. It was really
that really is, and
yeah.
that really is what has driven the whole project. And I think if you speak to those people who had those initial ideas, that's what they wanted it to be.
So what, in terms of unique construction elements, design, what was incorporated into this space to provide that complete lifestyle experience?
Well, I mean, the way that we started it, to Seb's point, was we looked at it as a French apartment, each having its own individual characteristic for each different room. Starting from there, what the room was actually going to evolve into really dictated the design. And so you could see very, very clearly as you move through the store, you're going to have a different experience in one room than you are in the next room.
Okay.
And so with the with that idea, we took the design to another level. I mean, there's something like 150 different finishes throughout the store. And so it's not like you're going to have the same experience twice. You're going to see something different around every corner.
Oh, wow.
There's artist installations from around the world. There's different spaces, as Jeff is saying, and different things that you can see every time you come into the store. One of the examples is the beauty corridor, which sort of is a transition from one space to another.
Okay.
It was completely constructed from GFRG, and the remit from Laura was, no straight lines. It's completely made so it's
like organic looking.
Yeah, exactly. And there's many features like that, and that's just one of, as Jeff said, hundreds of different design features within the space.
So when I hear hundreds, it gives me like a procurement. It makes me nervous about that. So what types of challenges? I'm thinking timelines, budgets, hundreds, procurement. Talk to me about it.
So procurement was at the forefront of our pre-construction thinking. We started pre-construction about a year before we actually started physical construction. And during that period, we put together a plan of how do we actually procure these materials. And some of the materials were normal materials, high-end finishes, but some of these materials were things that no one has ever done before. And we almost had to figure out how to make it a reality from Laura's sketches and her interior designs. And so we put in a very long effort into sort of that forward thinking.
And I think in terms of there's a lot of effort into that, and for me with these sorts of things, it also comes back to communication on procurement, because there was so many different suppliers, there was so many different materials. It sort of started from the top, really from Jeff and the rest of the team, that we'd have issues with procurement all the time, and it's the way that your team reacts to sort those issues and to resequence the installation is where we really sort of, I think, excelled on this project.
I love seeing your smiles when you bring, I just got to say that. I love seeing your smiles when we talk about these challenges, or I can just see your brains going to certain situations that have happened. And
it's almost like the Cheshire smile, right? Because you're thinking,
what's behind that?
You're thinking back to when you were in the moment, and at that point, how are we going to figure this out? But as a team, and working with Seb and the Cummings team and his team, I mean, it was almost no challenge was insurmountable. Mm-hmm. And that's the way we looked at it, because we were doing something first of its kind. And so we were sort of trail setting. We were going down a path that in some instances had never gone down before.
Yeah.
And I think we're clear that, in construction, unfortunately, not everything goes the way that you want it to go. And it's
you only try to mitigate things.
Yeah, it's the way that you react. And I was, lucky enough to work with Jeff in that respect, that it was always about, well, what's the solution? How are we going to move past this? How are we going to get it installed and done? And that was great.
So not to dwell on challenges,
Mm-hmm.
but talking about project management, these logistical hurdles, dense urban environment. How did you navigate that from a project management standpoint?
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that challenge of in downtown New York was always a thing. How do you get all of these materials to the space? It's something that, again, it's meticulous planning. It's working with all the different partners and all of the different suppliers to make sure that they can deliver on what they promised. In terms of actually delivering and sequencing, I think with this project, as Jeff said, it's one of a kind. We've not really done something like this before, and we had to look at sequencing in different ways. So
I was going to ask you about methodologies with this complexity of all these integrated experiences.
Yeah. So in one of the things that we actually switched halfway through the project was more focusing on areas within the project, and they would be their own sorts of sequential layers within the overall project. Quite often in construction, you'll have subcontractors, and you'll look at each trade as like a individual that's working throughout the whole site. We sort of had to split that out a bit more and go granular on each area, because each area was almost like a different project.
And so coordination with these teams, how did that go? And, what are those requirements for such a diverse building?
So coordination, again, it goes back to communication.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that we excelled on. We were working with suppliers, designers, consultants from all across the world. So it wasn't just New York or the US base. It was the US, but also Europe, throughout Europe and across the world. So we had to make sure that communication was number one thing of how we move this forward. And I think we did that.
Experiencing different time zones and different language barriers and different sort of challenges of working with a team where they're not physically with you in the project team room, but actually on the other side of a screen. And so I guess we benefited a little bit from the advent of, the post-pandemic world of Zoom and digital.
I was going to ask you, I'm sure some technologies were heavily relied on.
Heavily relied on. Yeah. So.
And kind of getting past that, but we're talking quality control. So many unique elements, finishes, and specialized installations. I mean, how did the quality control, how was that navigated?
Yeah, well, going back to Seb's point, establishing individual teams for those individual rooms was key, but however, not losing sight of the big picture. So we had individual teams that were assigned to those rooms, but then we also had an overarching almost committee which would sort of look at the project in totality and to ensure that we were achieving Laura's design, her design intent, the actual finish level of the project, and then also the quality that we wanted.
Lessons learned. I always like to ask that. From a project like this, I'm sure there were many highs, there were some lows, but stepping back and kind of looking at what the next could be, what lessons learned from this project?
I think we were pretty good at this, but actually something that you can always improve on is not sort of developing in silos. So from the beginning, from day one, you should have involvement from all parties. You should be talking to the operators, obviously architects, design teams, owners, and then thinking about how you're actually going to operate the space afterwards. I think we actually did that pretty well, but it's something that I think is fundamental to get these projects right, is to make sure that, you're going to have a beautiful design and it's going to be an amazing project, but also how is it going to operate afterwards, and how do we make sure that everything works as it should for the end user.
Yeah, not losing sight of the end goal and the big picture when you're in the thick of it, in that sort of construction, I think is a really important idea to keep in mind when you're working through these, because you're going 1,000 miles an hour to get to the finish line, but at the end of the day, if it's ultimately not as usable or user-friendly to the operator at the end, it's almost like, well, what was the point?
What was the stress?
What was the stress, right?
So, Seb, beyond what we're seeing today with Printemps and the viral hits like the Louis Vuitton flagship store that we worked on, what do you envision kind of this next evolution with luxury experiences?
So I truly think that what has been delivered at Printemps is something that will be replicated or
tried.
People will try to replicate it because it's such a it's creating an experience and it's adding all these different elements. I think one thing that we're seeing and throughout is sort of branded residences, branded hotels, and those sort of what we spoke about at the beginning: retail, hospitality, residential, all coming together and being an overarching experience for the owner and the customer.
Do you guys feel that these ultra amenitized buildings are sustainable from a financial and environmental perspective? Is this like the long-term game plan? Is this a fad? How do you feel about where things are going?
I think that if they're done right and they're done with the end user in mind, I think it's absolutely sustainable. I think it actually could get better and to another level. It's where the divergence comes when you don't listen to the market, when you sort of don't really try to think through the end user and how it actually will benefit the end user. I think that's where you might run into problems.
I think as Jeff's saying, it's like make sure that what you're supplying is actually intentional. So it's intentional for what that owner or customer or whatever they want, and it's intentional to that. And I think that will then make it have long-term success, in my opinion.
Are there any new technologies on the horizon? We've talked about kind of changing work patterns, but is there any technology that you might be considering for future in terms of the transformation of these spaces? Any international trends that we're seeing you're kind of keeping your eye on? Like, what is that?
Yeah. Well, I would be remiss if I didn't mention AI and the integration of AI into almost everything that we're going to be doing. But from a customer, a resident experience, we think that AI could be leveraged into basically every aspect of the retail experience as well as the residential experience. Everything from the customers or the residents' trends, how often they walk their dog, how often they actually they require reservations through our building concierge service, through what they like their apartments' optimal temperature settings at, and then
utilizing the data that we can collect to make the experience better.
Exactly, and just being creating a more smarter living environment. And then on the retail side, trends that we see where products may be a hot seller, and so that we could react almost instantaneously. Or if we have 7 F&B components in Printemps.
7.
7.
Wow.
Yeah. And if we actually have a run on certain reservations, or we have a hot seller in terms of an offering, how do we react to that and react quickly?
I think what I'd be interested to see, as Jeff mentioned, AI, and obviously how that data could be used as well at the beginning. When you're just starting the development, it can sort of provide answers of how these buildings should function and how people want them to function. And I think that's going to be fascinating to see how that develops.
So I have to thank you guys. This has been an incredibly insightful conversation about this evolution of hospitality, residential, retail, and really what to expect and keep our eye on for the future. But before I let you guys go, before we wrap up, what is one piece of advice that you would give developers, construction professionals that are maybe just starting to navigate this integrated landscape? And kind of what would be your main takeaway that they really need to kind of focus on in this world right now?
I would say that one takeaway is be nimble, be able to react to the data and the marketplace that you're receiving from your customer base, because if you are reactionary and almost sort of coming late to the party, that's not the best place to be. But if you can be flexible and you can be nimble and you could adapt, like we did in a few different instances at One Wall and Printemps, I think you're better suited than some of your competitors.
Yeah, and I think to follow on from that point, and I sort of mentioned it earlier, I think it's all about collaboration. And it's all about, if you're going to deliver something on the scale of what we've done here and what was delivered. You want to make sure that you have all of the parties there early on in the process, and that everybody is on the same page of how we get to that beautiful project ending that we're looking for. So collaboration always for me.
Collaboration's the win for you.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you both very much. And thank you to all of our listeners. And we will jump back in a little bit later. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for joining us for the Construction Insiders podcast. You can continue the conversation by leaving a comment, asking a question, or participating in our poll. You can also visit us at coming-group.com for more great resources from the most trusted team in the built environment. And don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date on our latest episodes.